let's talk now to Lord Andrew Roberts, historian and Conservative peer. He's the author of a parliamentary report on the October the 7th atrocities in Israel. Even now, as we speak, there are still hostages being held, of course, in Gaza. They have still not been released by Hamas. There's some activity that went on overnight, according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and their Defence Minister Israel Katz. They instructed the IDF last night to act with force against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. You'll hear on the news that there are supposed claims by Hamas that 200 odd people have been killed. I'm not convinced that those are innocent people, of course, because we know that you can't rely on their figures. But let's talk to Lord Roberts, because we still have to have this conversation almost a year and a half, maybe 2 years almost on from when it all kicked off in that horrible, ghastly, dreadful day, October the 7th, 2023. Lord Roberts, very good morning to you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for talking to us. I mean, every time I'm reminded of what happened on that terrible day, I remember we all woke up and were shocked and horrified to see what went on. I'm amazed that we're still waiting for some of those people who were taken hostage to be released. You've written this parliamentary report about what happened there. What have you learned, I suppose, would be my first question, from what you found out and perhaps what we don't know?
Well, what this report does, do you mind if I just show it to you? It's
sure,
going on online literally now.
Yeah.
What it does is to take the reader through a minute-by-minute chronology of the whole of the 24 to 48 hours. Between 6:29 a.m. on the 7th of October, when Hamas attacked, until finally the moment when they were forced out of southern Israel.
Right.
And it also goes into the circumstances of each of the deaths of the 1,182 people who were murdered that day. Many of them, of course, also tortured and raped. And so it's a gruesome read, I have to admit that. But nonetheless, I think it is necessary for us all to remember quite what happened, the depths of depravity that were committed by Hamas and its allies that day.
Yes, I mean, we've all seen, as journalists, and you were involved in that as well in your career, we've all seen some terrible things, but I don't think there's anything that I've seen, and I've seen some of the footage that many people have seen, but lots of people haven't seen from the day. You know, some of the stuff that Hamas filmed themselves, the social media that they put out. I mean, it's really the most awful, horrific scenes I think that I've ever witnessed one human doing to another, and just the terror on the faces of the people who were suffering. I can't really get it out of my mind, and I find it really difficult to understand anyone who kind of accepts it as the sort of as part of the conflict, because it really isn't.
That's exactly right. I, as an historian, can't really think of another occasion. I actually go back to the rape of Nanjing in 1937, to see something on that kind of scale, it done in that way, and deliberately. This is the other thing that comes out very strongly from our report, is that if you look at the plans that Hamas were making, the phrase books that they had given to their fighters, their terrorists, as they were crossing over into Israel, things like spread your legs and take your clothes off and so on. You know, it's all horribly premeditated what took place. And you're right, that 47-minute video that we both watched was so powerful because so much of it, remember, was taken from the GoPro cameras of the terrorists themselves. And yet now, astonishingly, 18 months later, Hamas is attempting to deny that it even took place. Right. There's a sort of Holocaust denial thing that they're starting up about it.
And that is the awful business, isn't it? That we can see very clearly that without Hamas, only then can there be some kind of settlement here, because Hamas is so ghastly and so awful and run in such a terribly brutal and misogynistic. I mean, misogyny doesn't even come into it really, it's a stupid word to use, but do you know what I mean? I mean, they're so barbaric. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and I can't imagine that there will ever be peace in that region as long as Hamas exists.
Well, that's right. And of course, what it also does in power in Gaza is to educate future generations of young Palestinians to grow up thinking that Jews are not fully human,
Right.
that they need to be killed en masse. And this is actually taught in schools to sort of 8-year-old
Yeah.
Palestinian Gazan children. And until they are forced out of government in Gaza, this is going to continue to be taught, and therefore it's just going to go on for
Yeah.
generation after generation.
And how much, I don't know whether you address this in the report at all, but how much do you think of Palestine, particularly Gaza, is influenced by Hamas? Because, we hear all the time that, it's not fair to say that all Palestinians support Hamas, because it bloody well looks like they do. And I find it very difficult to understand anyone who sort of justifies the Palestinians' freedom and rights to exist on that land because they want to absolutely cancel Israel completely.
That's right, exactly. It's in the Hamas charter. It's the driving force of Hamas. They've said, despite all these casualties in Gaza since then, they've said that they will undertake another 7th of October as soon as they possibly can. So they clearly don't care at all about the livelihood or well-being of their own people whatsoever. The sole reason that they exist is to try to wipe out Israel.
Yeah, and I mean, can you see an end to it? Because, as I say, we've got Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu admitting this morning that they've gone back into Gaza, even as the peace talks are kind of ongoing. And Gaza and of course, Hamas are claiming that they've killed 200 people, innocent people, which I'm not buying, really. But at the end of the day, can there be an end to this? What can you see happening?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right not to buy those numbers, owing to the fact that Hamas, the whole of the health ministry in Gaza, is a propaganda arm of Hamas. So the numbers that we've been given right from word go, lots of them are completely impossible actual numbers. The way in which they arithmetically went up by exactly the same amount every day for the first few months show that they were entirely invented numbers. So let's not even think about
And yet,
that.
every news organisation, including our own, reports them as if they're true.
Exactly, and that has been terrible, obviously, for the Israeli position, especially on social media like TikTok and so on, where pro-Hamas propaganda outweighs pro-Israeli propaganda by something like 9-1.
Yeah. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I mean, as we speak, we know that less than half of the 59 hostages who still remain in those ghastly tunnels are believed to be alive. And in your report, you say that the youngest of the victims on October the 7th was actually just 14 hours old. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
They took, can you believe, when I was in Israel, I saw these. They took incubators for babies onto the attack in southern Israel. The Hamas terrorists brought incubators with them in order to capture infants, tiny infants, babies, essentially. I mean, the sheer ghastliness, frankly, of all of it it's as I say, it's all documented in this very scholarly report, which I hope is at least going to stop people from saying that it never happened. And I'm afraid a growing number of people are falling for that Hamas propaganda.
I know, and which is awful, isn't it? And how can people get hold of it, Lord Roberts, if they wish to see it?
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Let me just put on my glasses and tell you the URL, which is, this is the sort of thing I ought to have off by heart, shouldn't I? But nonetheless,
No.
Thank you. It is 7oct Parliamentary Commission .co.uk.
Okay, we'll try and put that out on a tweet, and so people can just click on it and find it. Well, listen, I appreciate it. It's a great thing that you've done, Lord Andrew Roberts. Thank you very much indeed. We'll speak to you again soon, I'm sure.